In some sense, memory makes us who we are. It's our personal cumulative record of the life we've lived. But it's also unreliable, intermittent, and highly impressionable, isn't it? How can it be all those things? Neuroscience is unlocking answers all the time. So how exactly do we create memories, perceive experience, and store what happens throughout our lives? Let's ask. In London, UK, Charlotte Russell, cognitive neuropsychologist and associate professor of psychology at King's College London. In San Diego, California, cognitive neuroscientist Rosanna Olsen, a memory researcher at the Rotman Research Institute, an assistant professor at the University of Toronto, and director of the Olsen Lab. In Montreal, Quebec, Signy Sheldon, associate professor of psychology at McGill University, a Canada Research Chair in cognitive neuroscience of memory, and principal investigator at the Sheldon Memory Lab. And here in our studio, Buddhika Bellana, assistant professor of psychology at York University and principal investigator at the Memory and Meaning Lab. And it's great to have you four with us here on TVO tonight. Buddhika, nice to have you, first time on the program.
Thank you very much.
As it is, I think, for our three out-of-town guests as well. So delighted to have everybody aboard. Signy, let's start with you. What goes into making memories?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think the first point that we should talk about is that, or to keep in mind, is that we do have different types of memories that are created and stored in different parts of the brain. So we have a main division between memories that we have with and without consciousness. So we can have these implicit memories, which are memories that we actually store below the level of conscious awareness. So this is memories for our skills, things like tying our shoes or riding our bikes. And we know that these memories really do affect our behavior, and they actually are processed differently than these more declarative or memories that where we actually consciously experience what we're bringing to mind. So these memories, these episodic memories, are often what we're talking about when we refer to memory. So these are recalling specific past events. And if you think about recalling these events, they're extremely complex. We have a lot of pieces of information that go into them. We have the sights, the sounds, the smells, the events that unfolded, and so forth, and the time. And what's really vital and important to understand about this process is that all those pieces are brought into a memory and are actually stored all throughout the brain. And it's only when we actually retrieve a memory that we actually bring those pieces all together.
All right, let me follow up with Rosanna on that, because you mentioned senses. And I wonder, Rosanna, whether there are certain senses that make for more powerful retention of memories than others.
Great question. So often as cognitive neuroscientists who study memory, we often study the kind of visual sense, because that's the one that humans, at least, are the ones that are kind of most attuned to, that we pay most attention to. But as Dr. Sheldon just said, our memories are multimodal, our memories are rich. So we don't just have visual sensations that get recorded down, we have the sounds, and we have the other contextual information that was around that memory when we experienced it, like the smells and even tactile things. And so one of the parts of the brain that memory researchers really like to study is called the hippocampus. And you'll probably hear many of us refer to the hippocampus throughout this session. And the hippocampus is one of the regions that we think is especially important for connecting those different senses. And the reason for that is because it actually gets inputs from different modalities, so different processing centers in the brain that process audition,
Do you know
vision,
what? We got a picture of this.
olfaction.
While you're going through this, Sheldon, can you flip ahead there to top of page 3? And just because we're talking about this right now, so let's bring it up. Okay, there's the picture.
Oh, perfect.
You want to take us through it?
Perfect. Yeah, of course. So I just mentioned our favorite area as memory research is the hippocampus. So you can see it's labeled on the right side of the screen, but it's actually a structure that's nestled deep within the temporal lobe. So you have the temporal lobes of the brain, the frontal lobes of the brain, the visual sensory cortices are in the back in the occipital lobe, and then Buddhika Bellana's favorite region, the parietal region, which he can talk about in just a bit. And what happens is when you are experiencing an event, you have different processing centers that are processing the different aspects of that episode. So spatial information is processed by one part of the brain. In fact, the parietal lobe is very important for that. And that gets fed into the hippocampus. And then what we think the hippocampus is doing is putting together those different elements, and we call it binding. So gluing together different portions of our memories. And then, as Dr. Sheldon said, when we retrieve those memories, the hippocampus actually reactivates those regions throughout the neocortex, so throughout the rest of the brain, pictured in the diagram that you just showed.
Okay, but Charlotte, let me follow up with you in this regard. I mean, all things being equal, obviously, if you're visually impaired, it's one thing. If you're hearing impaired, it's another thing. But all things being equal, if you see something as opposed to hear it or smell it or taste it, are you likelier to retain a more powerful memory of that than if one of the other senses were at play?
I mean, I might be a bit biased because I previously was a visual scientist before doing memory. And a lot of our brain is involved in our visual processing. And I think it's hard also to imagine, if you can see, remembering something that has no visual content, because as we go about our daily life, we're taking things in through our eyes and also with all these other senses at one time. But when we try back and remember it, for most people, I think I'd be right in saying that most of the time we are building up quite a rich visual image in our mind at that time of remembering. And it has within it the objects that we saw and experienced at that time, the relationships that they have to each other and the world when we had experienced this event. And also, because we process it through our own eyes, it has our relationship to the objects in the world around us, to this egocentric representation, which when Dr. Olsen then was talking about the parietal cortex is very important for this spatial processing from our own eyes, from our egocentric, it's called, point of view. And some of us, I think that this personal perspective and remembering this accurately when we build up this visual image when recollecting is really important for associating our memories with ourselves, which is important for us to feel confident about our memories.
Buddhika, let me ask you this one, and you've heard people say this 1,000 times. There's something that may happen 25 years ago that just stays with them. It's firmly implanted in that memory, and something last week, which you would think you would remember because it's so recent, they can't remember at all. So what makes memories stick?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it's related to what everyone has mentioned so far, and Dr. Russell in particular. The one thing that I think is really interesting, and what you're pointing at, is this importance of meaning. So sometimes some of our experiences are meaningful to us. They connect to other things that we know, or maybe they're important to our notion of who we are. And I think these kinds of memories are the ones that tend to stick. And why they stick might be because we combine our memories for certain experiences that happen in our lives with everything else that we know, our prior knowledge. So if we can contextualize a given piece of information and connect it to other things that have happened in our lives, that piece of information is better situated and better connected to other pieces of information in our lives, and we are consequently better able to remember it. So in my lab, what I'm really interested in looking at is, what is this meaningfulness that seems to drive our memory system? And can we better define what that is as psychologists to, unpack how the brain supports and interacts with meaningfulness in relationship to remembering specific recent events?
That is a great question. Rosanna, have you got an answer for that?
Actually, I'll ask Buddhika how he is defining meaning and whether you can take apart meaning from just more experience. So is it just that there's more experiences related to what you're experiencing and then it has more connections to embed with? Or is there something special about the meaningfulness, something with the amygdala or something with the orbital frontal cortex? Do you think that there's something particular about meaning I'd like to ask?
Yeah. Sure. So in terms of what I think it's not only the number of connections, because we have tons of experiences in our lives, walking down a hallway where we might have done that like tons and tons of times, but it's not really that substantial. It's not really that important. It doesn't really actually connect to other things that are important to our lives. So I think there are certain features of our experience that might be more connected to things like our self and things like are the aspects of our past experience that we personally consider important, whatever those may be. And I think those ones might be overrepresented and more able to kind of like be subsequently remembered. And yeah, that's what I would say. So I wouldn't say it's all equal.
Signy, does that ring true for you?
I definitely agree with that. That we memories that are more meaningful are ones that are going to stick more. My thoughts are also trying to disentangle meaning from emotion, because we do know that powerful effect that emotion can have on us encoding and storing memories, and those memories really become central features. This is because of a region of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is very interconnected to some of these sensory processing regions that we've been talking about. So when you have an emotional event,
I'm going to ask our director to bring the picture up again so you can speak to it, because we got pictures for everything here.
Okay,
so
great.
let's see the brain again. Okay, there's the for those listening on podcast, the amygdala is over there on the left. In the middle, but labeled on the left.
Yeah, so it's just kind of like dipsy doodle down from the hippocampus. So when you have an emotional experience, the amygdala will actually send messages to some of these sensory perceptual processing regions of the brain to engage those processes. So you really pay attention to your environment, and subsequently you're going to encode that experience more than a non-emotional event. So emotion is something that is intricately tied to meaning. And, that's something that was just on my mind as this conversation was unfolding between Buddhika and Rosanna, is whether we can disentangle those effects.
Well, let me see if I can complicate things a little bit more here. Charlotte, I gather there are different types of memories that stick with people: semantic and episodic. What's the difference?
I think so. In the main, a lot of what we've been talking about are episodic memories. So memories for events that we have experienced, unique events throughout our life. So remembering having dinner last night, remembering our holiday last year, or even just remembering, well, it's after lunch for me, but walking down to get lunch just before this. All of these are episodic memories, whereas semantic memories are memories for facts that we've learned, general knowledge, things like that, but also personally related facts, so personal semantics, so the names of our best friends when we were young, or the knowledge of where something is in our local town. So these semantic memories are not for events. They don't have the same contextual information that we've been talking about a lot associated with these event memories, where we need to remember not just what happened, but where it was, when it was, tag it temporally in terms of our life timeline as well.
And does the brain tend to remember one versus the other more easily?
No, I think, it depends. So if you're remembering an event from your life, this might be classed as your autobiographical memory. And within this, you would be able to access, I'd say equivalently easily, the episodic information of the event for your lifetime and these personally semantic and otherwise general knowledge related semantic facts. I don't think one is easier or not, but it might be fair to say that episodic memory is more quick to decline as we get older. And it's also, there's a lot of evidence that it comes online later as well in development. So it might be the more temperamental or vulnerable part of memory than the semantic one, which tends to last in a much more stable form as we get older.
Rosanna, can I get you on that as well? And I'll just put myself forward as an example here. There are all kinds of semantic memories that are deeply engaged in this brain right now, and I think are going to be there for a very long time. Episodic, yes. Not so much. Is that typical?
Right. Certainly. So, somebody like yourself who has conversations all the time with many, many, many different people, you're learning a lot of different faces and names every day, but yet you're building up all of this vast semantic knowledge about the world. You're every day you're studying something different, but you're building each day on the knowledge that you've gained. And so that is really going to be with you for a very, very long time. But those episodes that you only experience once, so, well, hopefully you'll invite me back. But, this is the first time you've met me, and you might forget my name or my face because you only saw me that one time. And so, of course, as Dr. Russell just said, those are more ephemeral. And something else that many of us have also started to study is how these different types of memories decline with both age, just normal aging, and also with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And we know that actually, both eventually semantic memory is also affected, but first episodic memory is very much affected by Alzheimer's disease, sort of the main type of dementia that most people have heard of. And again, that's because of the hippocampus and the regions talking to the hippocampus starting to atrophy with disease, and then episodic memory starts to decline.
Well, two observations.
Also starts to decline in normal aging as well.
Sure. I was just going to say 2 observations on that. Number one, I think it's going splendidly so far, so I don't see any reason why I wouldn't invite you back. I think it's going well. And number 2, and don't take this the wrong way, Rosanna, but if you batted .688 in the 2013 World Series for the Red Sox, as David Ortiz did, I would remember that about you for sure. But, depends how these things work. Buddhika, random memory.
Random.
Why does that pop up? Random memory.
So you're referring to just like when spontaneously something comes to mind?
Absolutely, for no particular reason whatsoever. You might hearken back to something of, well, you're not old enough, but 50 years ago, let's say, something pops into your,
Sure.
How does that happen?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And there are a lot of people who study involuntary autobiographical memories. That's the term that's referred to as. I personally am not the expert of involuntary autobiographical memories, but one thing that I have been studying is spontaneous thought. So how and what we tend to think about when we're just thinking. And I think these ideas are related. Spontaneous thoughts, when we're just thinking, various things kind of come to mind. And one thing that's important is that there seems to be some kind of stream of thoughts. So our thoughts tend to be related to recent experiences. And if something random and an involuntary autobiographical memory comes to mind, there might be something in your environment or some previous thought that you may have had that kind of either explicitly, like consciously aware, or implicitly reminded you of that experience, maybe due to some kind of overlap between some of the underlying features of that memory that spontaneously came to mind and whatever is in your environment or you're actively thinking about at that moment. And that relationship between our episodic memory system and our ability to, think spontaneously, I think is a really interesting one, and might be also really related to the hippocampus and how it kind of holds these associations between different features of a past episode.
Well, let's cut to the chase here and really figure out why some people seem to be real aces at remembering things, episodic or otherwise, and why some people just have a devil of a time doing it. Signy, start us off. Why do some people have the ability to remember things so clearly, so quickly, so sharply, and others are completely vague on all the same stuff?
That is a good question as well. It's so funny. There's a huge acceptance of individual differences in memory ability, but it's something that's we're only recently starting to really take a deep dive in the research. For people who are really good at remembering, let's say, lists of numbers, so those memory champions who can recite pi for 978 digits or something. Often what you find is that these individuals are really good at using mnemonic strategies. So they'll use some sort of strategies to really deeply encode or really form memories that are then easier to bring to mind later on. So one that people often use to really help with memory is something called the memory palace. People watch Sherlock Holmes, they probably know this, where you take something familiar like a common space, and then you add whatever items of the list you're trying to learn within that visualized space. And there is a lot of evidence to show that really helps to bolster memory in both these people who are really, really good at memory, but also in individuals who are having some trouble. Now, with saying that, that strategy relies a lot on visual processing. And recently, there's been this discovery of individuals who actually have a complete lack of visual imagery, and that really changes the way these individuals remember. So these are people who are called people with aphantasia, and they cannot form a visual representation in their mind, yet they still can remember. It just means that they're remembering differently. They're not using these visual strategies when they remember. And that leads them to have a much different experience than someone who actually can use these visual images to recollect the past. So there is this difference in people who are really good at memory, bad at memory. But I think we also have to appreciate the fact that even within, our group here today, we all are going to remember the same experience very differently because we use different forms of processing when we're forming and retrieving our memories.
You've reminded me of something my father often says, which is, I've got millions of mnemonic devices, I just can't remember any of them, which kind of defeats the, anyway. Okay, let's follow up on this some more. Some people have a better ability to remember things than others. Charlotte, what would you add to that answer in terms of why that is?
I think, so something that I was thinking when Dr. Sheldon was just talking was also that it's not just visual that people are using those strategies, but space as well. And some people think that people with aphantasia can still maintain these spatial relationships without vision, which is interesting. And so I think having a very active and well titrated spatial representation of the world around us really helps us remember certain things. But also something I think that Dr. Sheldon's worked on as well is that it's not just that people are better or worse at memory, but there are differences in terms of what types of memory people are better at. So they could be using more episodic style strategies to remember even semantic information, placing it a bit like the memory palace, but in a more everyday way. So using information that links to themselves to remember the things they want to remember semantically because that episodic system feels stronger for them. Whereas people who have a stronger semantic memory might rely more on semantic memory strategies to try and remember events that happen to them, but with the very semantic related information rather than the event-based information.
Rosanna, what would you add to that?
Right. So you mentioned mnemonic devices and strategies, and some people actually do use these strategies quite effectively. We already talked about the memory palace, but another thing that we often tell older adults who are struggling with their memory is, just reminders are really important. And so if you find yourself forgetting things often or think that your memory is not strong, there's always strategies that you can do to help your memory. So using reminders, reminding yourself, okay, this is a really important client that I have to remember their name. So you're going to, use all the strategies that you have under your in your toolbox to remember that person's name. So you can always use these strategies to help your memory. And people who have quote unquote really good memory are probably using some of these strategies to help them remember certain aspects that they find important for their daily life.
Buddhika, well before you were born, I remember watching the Johnny Carson show, and he had a guest on who had met every single member of the studio audience, so that was about 150 people, before the show started. Yeah. He met them all for a second apiece, heard their names, and then an hour later, when the show was on, he literally went through every single person in the audience, got every single name right. How do you do that?
I certainly could not do that. But in terms of how you would do that, I think it relates to all these strategies that everyone's been bringing up. So you have to take the information that you're presented with the name, which otherwise is kind of like floating around without any connections to anything, and you have to come up with some kind of way to make that more memorable by connecting it to maybe some place, if you were going to use this kind of like memory palace strategy, or connecting it to often some kind of weird fact or some strange acronym. What you have to do is somehow take other things that you know that might be memorable and associate this piece of information, which otherwise might not be, to something memorable, which can give you a bit of an anchor. And these kinds of mnemonic strategies are ones that these memory champions tend to use, which I imagine this person used also. So
Right.
it's a skill. It's something that you can work on.
Rosanna, is it a fact that everything we have experienced in life is in our brain somewhere? We may not be able to access it when we want,
Right.
but is it all in there?
Some people would probably say yes. So some people would probably say that at least when your brain gets to a certain maturity level, it should be able to retain a certain amount of information. And we've seen that for certain types of memory, for example, pictures of scenes, you can test people on thousands and thousands of visual scenes, and they will remember them. It's really quite remarkable. And some people would say that when you forget things, it's not that you've necessarily forgotten that piece of information, but that it's in there, but you're just not cueing that information appropriately. And so when you are experiencing memory difficulties, sometimes, as you know, we all know, you'll think to yourself, I can't remember that person's name. I can't remember that person's name. But then 5 minutes later, when you go to the grocery store, the name pops into your head. And so that's why some people say that much of the information that sometimes we might think is forgotten is actually in our brains. However, it might have sort of kind of diminished, like faded into the background so far that we can't access it anymore unless you have the very specific cue or something comes along that strengthens it, and then you're able to retrieve that memory.
Right. And Signy,
certainly as you age, the connections become weaker and weaker and harder to access those.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. I'm experiencing that every day. Signy, on the other hand, something like, let's look at the other side of the coin, PTSD. For people, let's say frontline responders who have experienced PTSD, that somehow contributes to them forgetting particulars of certain circumstances. What's going on in the brain that makes that happen?
I mean, with PTSD, what often happens with that is people get very, very stuck on a single event. So you have this event that was very traumatic, and that event almost prioritizes the memory processing system in lieu of other information that people might want to take in. And what you find in PTSD is if you have this traumatic event, like a wartime experience, you're going to replay that in your mind over and over and over again in the same form that it's in. And so that memory becomes almost static, almost frozen in your memory. And it then is activated very strongly to a lot of different cues in your environment. So following up what Rosanna was saying about, there's cues and things in our environment that trigger our memories to come to our mind. And unfortunately with PTSD, what you see is that that trauma event really just encompasses so much of that person's sort of memory space that it's very easily accessed, and it's very tough to sort of change that memory. And that's actually what you want to do in a lot of therapeutic interventions, is trying to get to these memories that we need to change and get people to reappraise them in new ways so they don't create as much dysfunction as they do.
And Charlotte, we hear this expression before, photographic memories. Is that a real thing?
I think a lot of work's shown that sometimes we can very confidently believe we have a photographic memory of something, but if we're able to be objectively tested on exactly what happened, we might have remembered the gist and the emotional content of these flashbulb or photographic memories we have, but not the actual details. And sometimes the actual details, the fine details are not as good as for a less emotional, less high-powered photographic memory. But the perception that we have of remembering something in a photographic way is certainly real. That's what we believe. But how accurate that is might sometimes be at question. It might not always be perfectly accurate.
Gotcha. We're down to our last minute here. Signy, let me put this to you, and that is, do you think there's actually, we're talking about memory here, do you think there's a benefit to forgetting?
Absolutely. So, we can talk about forgetting as, problematic for aging and forms of dementia. But there's this other way to see forgetting that, the field is really, really focusing on right now as something that's really adaptive. So in our experiences, we have so much information that we really do have to prioritize what we want to remember from that experience and discard useless details from an event that aren't really going to tell us anything. So we need to actually forget some aspects of our memory so that we can apply whatever lesson we learned from a current experience to future events. So just like a quick toy example, if let's say you were like out in the street and you ran into like a bear and this bear like tried to attack you. And you're like, oh no, bears are dangerous when I see them. That's the information you have to take away from that event. If you start to focus on, the trees, your jogging, the sweatsuit color, the time of day and so forth, and say bears are only dangerous when I'm wearing this suit at this time of day, then you're not going to really take what's important from that memory and go forward. So being able to forget those little details and focus on the gist lesson from a memory is an essential component of memory, and it's essential for memory to be adaptive so we can actually survive and not get attacked by bears.
Otherwise you become what we call, I believe the technical term is lunch. Okay.
Exactly.
This was memorable. I want to thank all four of you for coming on our program tonight. Buddhika Bellana, Signy Sheldon, Rosanna Olsen, Charlotte Russell. Great to have the four of you on TVO tonight for such a memorable discussion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.